So before I go on and explain what I've been doing, you're going to have noticed the background has suddenly changed and maybe the lighting has changed as well. I have moved from our office to home during the isolation period with the whole thing going on. So if you're watching this in the future, I had to move. So I'm now working from home, which is great. Which means I'm a lot more comfortable. I have my own stuff in the background, I have my own stuff around me, and hopefully we can continue on with these and see how it goes. Anyway, back to the video. So the last step I was doing, if I recall right, before having to move, was applying my Necromancer cloak to the likes of the ribbing and the sort of bony protrusions in and around our eyes and stuff too. And that's been done, and as you can see on the face in particular, just how much that brings the eyes out. You know, in amongst this sort of pale, cold face is these burning orbs, these really bright eyes. Now they are a little bit lost with the gold, but I am planning now to work on that and actually bring the contrast of the gold down a little bit, or the brightness of it down a bit. So what I'm going to be using for that is a contrast paint, and we're going to be using Citadel's Agaros Dunes, and I'm going to be putting that over all the gold just to sort of dull it down a little bit. Contrast paint works very well for this, and the Agaros Dunes in particular is quite good because it's almost it's a colour I've used in the past on a live stream to actually do a non-metallic gold effect, so it wasn't the most outstanding fake gold effect, but it worked okay. So let's just see, we're going to start applying it. We're going to start on the shoulder here, and we'll work it into all of the interior details and little bits and bobs. And what it'll do is shade, tint, and also matte down the gold a little bit. And these are all things I really wanted to do because I don't want the gold to look too ostentatious. So I'm also going to be putting it over the red detailing as well because I'm just not that worried about it being too vibrant. It's already vibrant enough on her hair and stuff like that, so it's just going to be a case of applying this to every piece of gold on her. And then after that, we can see what we've got, and then we're going to work on the Necromancer cloak areas, painted areas as well. We'll give them maybe even go as far as putting a Black Templar contrast paint on them. But for now, we'll see what happens. So, with the Agaros Dunes now dry, we can see that the gold is looking really nice, really great. And it's got all the shading that I wanted. It's dulled it a little bit, so her eyes really do stand out a little bit more, which is really cool. Now, the next stage is we're going to be taking a shade, and we're going to be using Nuln Oil for this. And we're going to be putting that over everything that I painted Necromancer Cloak. So, this, again, is going to be really important on her face. So if I can get a little bit closer here. And all we want to do is start applying Nuln Oil over those areas. Trying to avoid the eye as much as possible. But we have other areas that we can go a little bit heavier on, so anything else that we've done like that, and we have these sort of protrusions here that I've done in Necromancer Cloak. And all this is going to do is just darken this material down a little bit more and just make it a little less grey looking. Now we probably could go in and highlight it too, but we'll see what it's like once the shade's down. But importantly as well, we're going to be doing the stuff that's around the bottom of her breasts and all this stuff that's running down the sides of her rib cage as well. So it's just going to be a case of getting a little bit of that in there, and also using it to shade the area where these pieces join her skin. and just letting that Nuln Oil just add another layer of shadow in there, just to make it a bit more interesting from the visual perspective. With the Nuln Oil now dry, and with a better background put in place, the paint pots were really getting on my nerves. I do apologise. I hope they weren't too bad for you guys, but we've put this in place now. It might work. It's time to highlight the gold, and for the gold we're going to be using Liberator Gold, Citadel Liberator Gold, but we're going to be applying it as a bit of a dry brush. So, and we're only going to be doing certain areas, so let's have a look. So let's start up here. And I'm just wanting it to give the gold a bit more luster, to make it stand out a little bit more on details. I don't really want it to seriously brighten up the gold again. I just want it to bring it back to life a little bit, as even with the contrast paint doing its job very well, it's just lacking a little something. So I'm hoping just a little bit of this, and I think you can already see it's working a little bit. I just wanted this to bring the gold back up again, just a little bit. And that's basically all I want to do. I do not want to push my luck with the gold. I don't want to ruin how muted it was, and I want to keep it that, but at the same time, you know, if we don't highlight it, it's not really going to look like anything. So what I really want to do now is highlight the darker grey areas, the stuff that we've put the Nuln Oil on before. So I'm going to pick a colour just randomly off my desk here, and I think I'm going to go with Dark Reaper. It's usually quite good at highlighting a darker greyish black sort of coloration, so we're going to see how we can go about this, and I'm going to use a small brush, get a bit of this. I almost think Dark Reaper is just a touch lighter than the Necromancer Cloak, and it has a bit of a blue tone to it as well, so we're going to find out what this does, and if it works then we're going to go with it. So let's bring her a little bit closer, see how close I can get with the camera. And let's have a look up here. There's a hair on my brush, for goodness sake. I'm just trying to highlight the edge of the top edge of this horn. And let's move down onto her ribs here. So I did what I thought I was going to do. I changed the color. So I went from Dark Reaper to Thunderhawk Blue. And I don't know how well you're seeing this on screen, but to my eyes, it's just got the tiniest little bit of a highlight, particularly around the head piece here. And you can see, hopefully just see a little bit of it on her ribs, and particularly on her back, around her hip. Just a little bit of a highlight on this piece here, and I wanted to bring that to the fore as well. So highlighting to the minimum, really. I don't know what you guys think. Of course you can tell me in the comments what you think. It's also been done further down on these other little bits. I don't think the highlight is hurting, that's for sure. It's definitely helping in a way. I'm just maybe unsure now if Necromancer Cloak had been the right step. I probably should have went a little bit darker to begin with, then given it a black wash, and then the highlight would have been a bit more apparent. So that's something to learn from, and something, you know, if I feel like it, I can always revisit the model and do that again in a different way. So yeah, perhaps that would have been a better way to go about it, and like I said, no miniature is really complete until you feel you're happy with it. So even after I'm done with this vlog, I may go back and change the colour on these bits, just to make myself a little bit more happy. Anyway, we're going to be moving on now to the swords. And the swords are epic looking, and I wanted to make them look a bit like a bone sort of sword, and maybe have a little bit of fleshiness in these little areas here. So what I'm starting with is I'm getting my dry brush out again, and I'm going to be using Morghast Bone, and we're going to be just giving the sword blades just a little bit of a dry brush of these to tone them up a little bit, because at the minute just pure black and white, yeah sure it's okay, but I'm planning to use contrast paint and I want a little bit of tone in there to begin with. So, pardon me, make sure it's okay, and all I'm going to do is dry brush down like that, catching the top edge and just giving that a little bit of a tone like that. So nothing too drastic, same on the other side. So now hopefully we have a little bit of colour on the two swords, and I'm going to quickly wash my brush off, and then we're going to grab our next contrast paint, which is going to be none other than Skeleton Horde, and I'll get a nice brush to apply that with. Put a bit of water on the brush, not much, and hopefully now we're going to see what these blades are going to look like as just big bony things. So that's the technical term, by the way, just big bony things. And we'll see how the Skeleton Horde goes down over this flat area that we have. What we may do is give it, well, we probably will give it another dry brush after the Skeleton Horde's been put down and been left to dry. I think a bit of Tyrant Skull will help. Okay, so obviously the swords aren't going to show too much on the back because of how dark they are, but on the front we're getting quite a nice muted bone colour, and I'm enjoying the look of that quite a lot. So we're going to let that dry. I think maybe in the meantime we might have scope to work on the red gems and stuff that I keep harping on about and never end up doing anything with. So this is what I was wanting to use, a Spirit Stone Red. So this stuff dries gloss, and I know that if I do this now I will be matte coating the model, and it will probably reduce, well, it will reduce that glossy effect, but I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to leave them as they are. I'm not going to put anything else on them. I'm just going to apply this stuff. It's kind of like a gel, so let's see what this does, shall we? I want to leave these dark because I don't want it to look like they have light emanating from them. I just want them to be kind of like dark sort of balls of ruby or something like that. This is maybe a step that I'm rushing a bit too much. Should be taking a bit more care with it. So now the Skeleton Horde is dry on our swords. There's another thing I want to note as well. I did give a second coat of the red onto the parts on the hilt of the swords and on the gems that run down the front of her body. So that's helped a little bit. I'm happy enough with how they look. I also went over some of the chains. I clearly missed a couple of pieces here and there with the Agaros dunes. So I just went in and did a little bit of a tidy up step. You know, these things happen, you forget things, and in the moment of making sure you've filmed something, you forget something else. So, back to the swords then. We're going to be doing 2 dry brushes to the swords. And the first one is going to be using Citadel Dry Tyrant Skull. I actually really like the dry paint range. Yes, I understand a lot of people are like, oh, you know, it's just thick paint. And yeah, you're right. But at the same time, it's nice to have a paint that just takes a bit of the thinking out of it, you know. it's the color you want, and away you go. So let's look at this blade first, and I want to try and give it as much of a dry brush as I can. To really sort of hammer in the color and keep the Skeleton Horde contrast paint as sort of the base tone of the sword. So we'll get the edge in as well, as much as I can. Both look even enough, that'll do. Now, there's going to be a second dry brush here, but it's only going to be on the uppermost areas, sort of an upper highlight sort of thing. And we're going to be using Praxetti White, which is a bit of an off-white. It's almost a white. It's practically a white. You know, I went from saying, you know, it's an off-white, it's practically a white. I'm pretty sure it is just white. But that's alright. We'll not clean our brush or anything for this, so if there's any remaining Tyrant Skull on the brush, it may actually tone it a little bit more, so it won't be just as harsh. And all I'm wanting to do with this is just try and add a little bit of what you could call a bit of a shine or a shimmer or a glint. Now obviously the sword I'm doing is meant to be looking a bit like bone, so I don't want to over highlight it too much. Make it look like all the light's coming at the blades from the front. So that's not too bad. Again, we'll go over to this side. Now, I want to do a little bit of something in these areas here, and I think just something very simple for that, which also gets us on to working with the reds. I'm going to be using a bit of Carroburg Crimson. It's just a shade, and I just want to work that into those recesses a little bit. It's quite a deep, sort of a burgundy red wash. And this should add a bit of a fleshy element to the swords. Not too worried if it goes over the edge a little bit. In fact, maybe just carry it over that edge a bit more purposefully. Bit like that. Just adds a bit more interest to it and makes it look more biological in nature. I know the bone color already sort of gives that away a bit, but at the same time adding a little bit of something hints at just something else and just makes it a bit more visually interesting. So we want to work on the reds now. Since we have the Carroburg Crimson open anyway, we may as well start working on our reds. So I'm trying to find a brush that's suitable here. This brush might be a bit big. No, let's go for it. So we'll start on our hair. We're going to give our hair a run with this, and then it's basically after that it's just a highlight. So this is just to accentuate the shading on the top. Because we didn't really shade anything on the top, we lost some definition because the airbrush highlight is very indiscriminate. So we need the shade on top of all the airbrush work to bring some definition back into her hair, and then we can make it really pop with a little bit of a brighter red highlight. So yeah, we're going to be dulling it a little bit because of this, but it's going to make it look a whole lot more interesting. And a whole lot more... Well, it will look more vibrant once we put the highlight on. Put it that way. It'll be a lot more interesting in that regard. We'll also do the banners at the same time. And it's always great how nice or how much a wash affects something as simple as a little bit of cloth. Particularly when you get the tone right, and you've the Carberg Crimson in this regard, it's really making the cloth look rich. So with the wash all dry now, you can see that it's dulled a little bit, but it's still keeping a bit more of a richer colour. Now, we're going to move on to a little bit of a layer here, because I want to make sure my cloth and my reds are quite good. So we're going to be moving on to a layer of Mephistone Red. I have thinned it down on my palette a little bit, and basically what I want to do is just start the highlighting process a little bit. So I want to make sure that I'm nice and thin before I start here, just to make sure the flow's right. So let's start on this side, shall we? This is the type of brush control I'm not really used to, particularly on big flat surfaces, so if I get it wrong, then whoops. So I'm just trying to get nice straight lines. Definitely not something I'm used to. Duncan can do this so much better than me. So just trying my best here to get a smooth sort of layer down there. Maybe thin it a bit more actually. I'm maybe not getting exactly what I want here, so let's see, I'll move a bit closer. With the layering now done, you can see on the hilts of the swords, for example, it's just a little bit brighter, not too much. On the cloth work on her back, yeah, it's not my best work, to be honest, but I think it looks alright. I think I probably did a better job on the back than I did on the front. I think I was a bit too harsh with it on the front, but on her hair, it's looking really slick. So, to finish this off, or to finish the red off, we're doing a quick dry brush of Evil Sunz Scarlet, and that is going to just pop these midtones, these darkened midtones a little bit, with a bit of brightness to it. Now I could go all the way up to orange, but I think just this little bit of red is going to help absolutely nail it a little bit. So let's try on the hair, and the way I'm going to use the dry brush is just to pick out, using the side of the brush, just pick out some brighter areas and some upper layer detailing. And I'm doing it with the dry brush because I don't want the hair or the cloth to look perfectly smooth, and I think the dry brushing aids in doing that because it adds a bit of a sort of a textured look. Now I could be talking out my rear end entirely, so you know, but I always like to lean on very simple techniques to get something done and to get an effect that I want. And I think in this case it's working quite well. I think that hair is actually quite poppy, if that's that's a term that's usable. So on the cloth, I'm going to take the edges up and then sort of just work in over the material a bit. And what I'm trying to do, and I don't know if it's really working or not, is I'm trying to keep the strokes of the brush in a sort of similar direction, sort of going a bit diagonal. And I'm kind of hoping that that adds sort of a little bit of a texture to it as well as a highlight. I'm not sure it's working that well, but I'm not too concerned. I just wanted to try it. And you can always tell me in the comments, guys, if you think, you know, hey, that didn't turn out too bad, or, you know, maybe try doing it a different way. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with taking that comment on board. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now, for the swords, obviously I don't have a dry brush small enough, so what I'm going to end up doing is just taking a smaller brush, and we'll see if we can just catch the edges of the material that's wrapped around the hilts. Be a bit more careful with it now at this point. You know, that's okay. That's alright. I like that. I'm happy enough with that. And I don't want to do any more because I'm going to wreck it if I do any more. So let's put that to the side. Now, I need to clean my dry brush a bit more properly, or can I switch out to a different brush? I think I could switch out to a different brush. Let's see if I have another one handy here. I think I do. I have tons of brushes sitting around me, so I have to make sure I have the right ones. So I'm going to switch to this old battered thing, and I'm going to highlight a bit more her darker sort of turquoisey. So the paint I'm going to use is Hydra Turquoise. Quite fitting, I guess, in a way, really. I do like turquoise, though. So I'm going to give this, the darker areas, a very light dry brush of this, because it's quite a bright paint, and I don't want to ruin that sort of dark feeling I have going on with the rest of the miniature. I'm going to give it a very light dry brush just to bring the detail out a bit more. And again, only on the most upper surfaces. So the plan is to make a mess of my desk to get the brush prepped and make sure that the brush is working light enough. I think this should do it. So let's see. So how am I going to show this off? Well, let's do this. So let's try on our horns first here. I think I'm okay with this. I think it's just adding a little bit more to where I've not really done much previously. So let's have a look at her back, because this is where I kind of want it to be a bit more apparent and take charge of the coloration a bit more. Now down her back and her tail, I'm not too sure how much of this I want to do, but we'll do a bit anyway, because this area here sort of has the airbrush highlight on it anyway. So, and then we'll start doing bits that are supposed to be a bit lighter anyway, according to how I airbrushed it. I think turquoise in this sense works well because it adds sort of an unusual, almost ethereal look. You know, this creature doesn't exist, and her coloration and stuff should be as alien as the shape of her suggests. And that's just my opinion. That's how I like to paint this sort of stuff. You know, if you want it to look really alien, pick colors that work well together, but also have contrast, and just make her look like she shouldn't. You know, that she is a high fantasy creature, and just makes her look odd. Okay, so with that done, let's see if there's a color. I think there is a color I want to use for her lighter areas, just to tidy them up a little bit more, and then I'm content to call her finished, and I'll do the basing off screen, and you can see it all completely done. And I don't want to focus too much on basing because it's not about the basing in this case. It's about the miniature. It's about Raging Heroes, and I'm hoping to show off this miniature as best I can with the limited skill set that I have, and the basing is just part of the final framework, I think. So I'm going to take a little bit of Fenrisian Grey. I'm going to use the same brush I have been using and sort of apply it as a bit of a dry brush, I think, just to see if we can tidy up what the contrast paint was doing before. It shouldn't be that hard to do, so only quite lightly as well. We don't want to go too mad. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this miniature done. I'm going to do the basing, and then I will let you see her as well as I can, hopefully through some images and stuff like that. And yeah, we'll get the basing done, and I'll come back and show you her exactly how I want her to be. And here she is. The Avatar of Taïpahn is now finished. It's been a long one, I'll give it that. I hope you've really enjoyed this one. Now, a couple of things. I did add pupils to her eyes. Now, these are very simple pupils. They're just a little bit of a small black line coming down from the top eyelid and just going into the center of the eye just a little bit, because I find if you do circles or try to do anything too complex, that's when you start to mess eyes up. Plus, I think a slit pupil eye gives her a lot more personality, and I think you can probably see how much personality, how much more presence she has now that she has details in her eyes. So I'm very happy with that. The other thing I've gone and done as well is given the entire model a coat of matte varnish. In this particular case I used Citadel Storm Shield, but I put it through an airbrush with very little thinning, just very little thinning, and gave the entire model a good coat of that. So she may actually look a little bit more matte now as well, which is nice. Now let's move on down. We can see how everything has taken that matte varnish. I think she looks a little bit better. I feel like the gold has settled down a lot more. I feel like the blues and the turquoises have come up a bit more, which is great. And then down onto my basing. I didn't want to do the basing on camera, as I said, because it's more about the model rather than what extra details I've been putting on. So this is just a few Citadel Technicals, the texture paints with a bit of pigment powder over them, and then a bit of pigment fixer, a dry brush, and then some tufts. If you want me to cover that, I will. Or I believe Jerry has probably done some good basing techniques already, so go check out Jerry Can if you're confused or want to learn more. So she has been an incredible project to work on. a huge thank you to Raging Heroes, to all the staff there, to the design team and stuff who encouraged me through the Altar of the Succubi, and really wanted to see this being painted as well. So I hope I've lived up to some sort of standard that you guys have. But that's her. I'm over the moon with the end result. I'm very, very happy. She's going to sit on my shelf now for a long time before she makes it back into the office. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've really enjoyed this one as much as I have. And until next time, stay safe, take care, and see you again soon.